NATO has finally entered the Ukraine battlefield. No, it's not sending troops yet, but NATO tanks are rolling into Ukraine. The deliveries have begun, plus NATO is inching closer to the Russian border. It is expanding. Finland is set to join the alliance. The decks have been cleared, and this only means that the challenges for Russia are mounting. And it's happening with the onset of spring. Perfect timing for Ukraine to launch an offensive. How is Russia gearing up to respond to this? It is replenishing its own arsenal and stitching more defense partnerships. The latest one in the picture is North Korea. Russia is getting defense supplies from North Korea. That's what the Americans say, that Moscow will give food to Pyongyang in exchange for weapons. The deal, if it happens, will be a violation of UN resolutions. But we're way past that, way past following rules here. The West tried to corner Russia with sanctions. Russia has got a veto power plus diplomatic cover from China, and now its goal is to turn this advantage into territorial gains. So who has the upper hand in the war? Let's start with the latest. After weeks of waiting, Ukraine is finally getting the tanks it wanted. The Leopard tanks from Germany and the Challenger tanks from Britain. The UK is sending a total of 14 tanks. Germany has shared 18.
We stand
by Ukraine, which we support politically, financially, but also with arms deliveries and especially with the military training that both our countries provide. Germany and the Netherlands have jointly delivered armored infantry fighting vehicles and ammunition and are currently preparing, together with Denmark, the delivery of Leopard 1 main battle tanks.
Very modern tanks, he says. Germany was initially reluctant, but under pressure from US and allies, it relented and agreed to share tanks with Ukraine. Earlier, Norway had sent 8 tanks. What about the US? It hasn't made any deliveries yet. Last week, the US promised to speed up.
In close coordination with Ukraine, has made the decision to provide the M1A1 variant of the Abrams tank, which will enable us to significantly expedite delivery timelines and deliver this important capability to Ukraine by the fall of this year. It will also give Ukraine a very similar capability to the M1A2, which includes advanced armor and weapon systems to include a 120mm cannon and 50 caliber heavy machine gun.
How many tanks will America give Ukraine? Reports say at least 31. And how many tanks will Ukraine get in total? Kiev is expecting at least 120 tanks in the first wave. And how will it use them? In combat missions. Ukraine says they'll begin very soon. The tanks will boost its defenses and the morale of its troops. Before sending them to the front lines, Ukraine's defense minister took the tanks out for a spin. He released these videos showing off the NATO tanks. If social media posts could win a war, Ukraine would have bagged it by now. But that's not how it works. And unfortunately for Ukraine, Russia is intensifying the attacks. There's no breakthrough in Bakhmut yet. Today, Russia targeted Kharkiv in the northeast. Russian forces unleashed drone and missile strikes. Civilian infrastructure was targeted. Reports say Russia launched the missiles from the S-300. Also, Iranian drones were in the sky. And what is Zelensky doing? He's giving interviews. This week, he spoke to the Associated Press. Ukraine's president was asked about Bakhmut. This is a city in the east where Ukrainians and Russians have been fighting for months. Many lives have been lost, but neither side is ready to give up. Zelensky says he won't allow Putin a win on the battlefield.
Is this part of why you are fighting so hard in Bakhmut? Because a lot of military analysts will say that strategically it's not that significant.
Because that will be victory for him. He will.
And any victory.
Yes, he will sell this victory. He will sell this victory to West, to his society, to China, to Iran, to all the countries.
That is Zelensky's fear. He claims Putin will use a win in Bakhmut as leverage and push for a deal that will heavily favor the Russians. But Washington has a different assessment. It says Putin is not preparing for a negotiation. He's ramping up his military supplies. The US says Russia is sending a delegation to North Korea. They will offer food to the North Koreans, and in return, they'll get weapons. In fact, let me quote from what the White House has said. As part of this proposed deal, Russia would receive over 24 kinds of weapons and munitions from Pyongyang. We also understand that Russia is seeking to send a delegation to North Korea and that Russia is offering North Korea food in exchange for munitions. The idea is not far-fetched, but remember the West made similar claims about China too, that China will arm the Russians. That hasn't happened yet. So far, Beijing has only supplied dual-use equipment to Moscow. Dual-use are goods that are meant for civilian use but can also be repurposed by the military. The Chinese have not sent any lethal arms yet. This month, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Russia. He presented his much-hyped peace plan. Putin supported it. The West rejected it. What about Ukraine? Zelensky did say that he wants to talk to Xi Jinping. And they were supposed to talk to each other, but it hasn't happened yet. Zelensky is still waiting for the phone to ring.
Of course, I gave all the diplomatic and public and not public to President of China, to leader of China, and I want to speak with him because I had contact with him before full-scale war.
Meanwhile, China's defense ministry says it's looking to increase military cooperation with Russia. The statement came yesterday. China said it would join hands with Russia to promote world peace. And I'm not making this up. The statement made no mention of military supplies. Either way, Beijing is firmly in Moscow's camp. It has been backing Russia in a steady yet limited fashion. And despite Xi Jinping's desire to be seen as peacemaker, there is no peace in sight. The war has completed 401 days, and both sides are adding to their arsenal to continue fighting.